Hello and good Sunday evening. Tomorrow is Labor Day here in the good old US of A. So some of us have a holiday. So we are going to talk about emptiness today. Yesterday we talked about uh, alternate timelines and how you can be having parts of yourself in alternate timelines that don't serve you. That you can have yourself in multiple timelines where the other timelines are pulling you away from your ideal timeline. So maybe we should talk about that for just a little bit. And again, I'm coming from my belief, my understanding. It's important to understand that whenever you listen to somebody who has an opinion and starts talking like I do, in facts, like this is that, and this is that, and this is this, and this is that, they are operating from their assumption, either assumptions they themselves have consciously chosen to accept, or they are operating, like in the case of religion, they're operating from assumptions made by other people. So we're going to be talking about my assumptions about all kinds of things. So here's where I'm coming from when it comes to alternate timelines. I like the idea that science, physics says that it is impossible for there not to be infinite numbers of timelines, and that whatever it is that you can imagine happening, good or bad, and everything in between, if you can imagine it, it has to exist. Even things that you're not consciously able to imagine have to exist. In other words, there's a timeline where you're king of the universe. There's a timeline where you're armless, legless, crack addict on the street, and everything in between. Now, I come from my perspective, which is based on my experience. This isn't just an idea. I didn't read it out of a book. This comes from me doggedly seeking to create my ideal life. Everything that I teach is based on me and my experience. Now, that doesn't mean I don't use other people's experiences, but if I can't put it into practice, I don't either, don't use it, or I don't teach about it. I only teach about that which I have been able to put into practice or am putting into practice. So I lost what I was saying. So there's infinite numbers of timelines, and you can be any number of things, and this has to be happening. According to mathematics and science, this has to be happening, whether you like it or not. You are experiencing all the things that you want and all the things that you fear. Some version of you is out there experiencing it. So as I'm talking to you about it, the way that I feel about it is that there is your ideal timeline, which is the perfect timeline for you in this life. And all of the other timelines are sort of like shadow selves of you. They aren't really you. They don't necessarily have to connect to you unless you give life to them. And the way you give life to these alternate timelines is you take actions that are not based in your deepest happiness. So when you take actions towards your integrity, which means also you don't do things which will be injurious to your ability to stay connected to your soul. As long as you don't do that, then you take actions towards your greatest joy, your greatest happiness, then your true self, your whole self, will be along that pathway. So imagine all these other reflections of all these other versions of you are out there, and they're pulling on you. Each one of those shadow selves, which doesn't really have, your life force, your consciousness attached to it, they're playing out like programs. And they're trying to pull your consciousness into them. And if you choose to, your consciousness can get sucked into one of those timelines. And if you're in one of those timelines, then you're going to, at the very least, have this feeling that something is missing. Something fundamental in your life is missing. You may be outright miserable, but at the very least, you have this feeling that something is not right here. I belong somewhere else. When I was a kid, I felt like I didn't belong on Earth. I felt that, I was an alien. I can remember as a little kid, I had this idea that everybody else was robots, and I was the only one that had emotions. Sound familiar? There's a lot of people that talk about bots and living in a matrix, and that there are bots running around that aren't really people. And as you know, when somebody says that, I shoot that down immediately. Because what that shows is that this is a person who is very isolated emotionally. And so they're projecting onto the world around them their feeling of isolation. And so they feel as though they are the only persons with emotion, very narcissistic, very childish, and they project onto everything around them. Isn't it interesting? That's what serial killers do. Serial killers are incapable of having any empathy for their victims. They're just things. So again, getting back to this idea of being in the perfect timeline. To be in the perfect timeline is the timeline where your soul operates from its highest capacity, and you have the greatest amount of conscious awareness. And so the only way to experience that is to take action towards what makes you happy. That's the beacon that pulls you towards the ultimate timeline. And all of the other sort of shadow timelines are always pulling at you, trying to pull you into an alternate false reality. Let's look at it that way. So that's where I'm coming from when I start to talk to you about emptiness. And so let's talk about the word emptiness from a spiritual perspective and from a mythological perspective. So in the mythology of my ancestors, the Norse, which represented, by the way, they were the last Germanic people in Europe that held on to their indigenous polytheist shamanic beliefs that had been practiced and studied for tens of thousands of years ever since the dawn of time. So the last version of that, the Germanic meaning, all the people who speak Germanic languages, whether that be Old Norse or English or German, Dutch, Swedish, Icelandic, these are all Germanic languages. I'm getting kind of lost. I'm a little tired today, but in that ancient tradition, there was a place called Ginnungagap, which is Old Norse for, see if I got this right, Yawning Chasm. I like that phrase, yawning chasm, because that gives an intensity to it. That's what it is. It's designed to give you an experience of more than just emptiness. So when I use the word emptiness, Normally, the normal New Age knee-jerk reaction to the word of emptiness or emptiness meditation is this place where it's just full of empty peace. It could very well be that. It depends on your state if you're in it. Because Ginnungagap is actually the most powerful, the most potent, the most intense state that there is. It's just that it is so powerful and it is so raw and it is so undifferentiated that it's impossible for there to be any specific manifestation. So we call it emptiness. We call it emptiness because we can't describe it because nothing has congealed into anything specific. In the Norse mythology, Ginnungagap was a really horrible place. It was awful. It was full of the waters of life that were actually poisonous. So you wouldn't want to travel to Ginnungagap thinking you're going to find peace and emptiness. No, you're going to find the poisonous waters of life. Why is it poisonous? Because if you were to drink those waters, they would turn you into a state of pure emptiness, which means that all the things that you are, your identity, who you think you are, what you think you are, your physical body, all the things that the definitions that make you up would be torn to pieces. Because in Ginnungagap there is no specific anything. Nothing has been delineated. There's just emptiness. By emptiness I mean pure potential. So not like emptiness like peace or blackness, but like just molecules flying around. It's just like being in the middle of a nuclear explosion, just stuff flying around. Nothing's settled anywhere, but it's just pure energy. This is, by the way, the ultimate essence of the feminine. In the spirituality of the Taoists that I practiced, which was, there was a martial art and a spiritual practice and an energy practice, which they called spirit fighting. And what I was taught is that the most powerful, the most deadly force in the universe is the feminine. And I'm going to explain to you why that is. And the great thing about internal martial arts, meaning martial arts that are connected to energy, is that you can't just sit there and philosophize about something. You have to actually physically be able to replicate it and use it. Otherwise, it's worthless. Because martial arts, the point of martial arts is fighting. It's not self-defense. By the way, self-defense is not martial arts, just to let you know. The whole idea of self-defense is really kind of pointless. Learning something to defend yourself from an attack is kind of pointless. Martial arts comes from martial, which means war. Means warfare. Warfare is about killing. So martial arts should never be, if you're going to train in martial arts, you should train to cause serious damage. Otherwise, don't waste your time, in my belief. And the great thing about it is if you learn a martial art that is really, really effective, you never have to use it. You never have to use it. You never have to prove yourself to anybody. I never did I do any of these fake fighting or none of that stuff. It's like having a gun. You never pull a gun unless you're going to shoot, and you never shoot unless you're going to shoot to kill. If you're not prepared to shoot to kill, you don't pull your gun. I believe martial arts should be the same way. You should train like that. If you're not going to do that, don't bother. So then you're asking to get hurt, in my opinion. I don't know how I got on that. So the feminine. And I was taught how to tap into the power of the feminine and to strike an enemy with the power of the feminine, which looks really kind of silly. It does. The fighting with masculine people, it looks really good. When you hit with feminine, it looks kind of silly. But when you tap into the pure feminine energy of it, and you just tap somebody with the feminine energy, they'll crumble. And I've seen this happen. I've seen where big, huge, in fact, the bigger they are, the more muscular they are, the angrier they are, you just tap them with a little bit of feminine energy. And some of them will be reduced to tears. They'll start blubbering, their lips will quiver and their eyes will fill up. And that's if you just tap them. If you really crack them with the feminine energy, it's more than just physically devastating. It can be spiritually and energetically really devastating because it creates an emptiness. And there was a way that we used to strike where, and I'm not going to try and explain it to you, but with one hand you would be striking with the power of the feminine, which would suck all of the energy of the body towards where that hand was hit. And then immediately following that would be the male hand, which would strike where all the energy had been drawn away. And it's like, and it's just like getting hit with a nuclear bomb. This is the power of the feminine. I'm trying to explain to you that Ginnungagap, the power of emptiness, true emptiness is not this place of peace and nothingness. It's a place of intensity. And I do recommend, and I'm going to be recommending, that you seek to enter this place of emptiness. Maybe not directly into the ultimate Ginnungagap because you won't survive, but to go to this place of emptiness so that you can have the ability to create exactly what you want. Because this is what the feminine is. The feminine is the birthplace of energy. The womb is the birthplace of energy. And so how do you get to this place of emptiness? If we understand that everything is a cycle, again, this is another thing that I don't agree with when it comes to religion, whether it be Western religion like Christianity or a lot of New Agey stuff, where you want to reach a state of enlightenment or salvation, which means sort of a cessation of energy. That is not how the universe has ever functioned. It's always been a cycle. And everything is a balance. This is why I like shamanism. Shamanism is about creating a static harmony. Excuse me, not a static harmony. I take that back. It's the exact opposite of what I wanted to say. Shamanism is about creating a dynamic balance of these energies that never stop moving. And we use the 9 worlds and we use the 8 directions of the world tree, which you can see here in the thunder wheel. And we are constantly seeking to find a dynamic balance within this ever fluctuating energy. So I want you to get rid of the idea that there's going to come a place where if you're spiritual or if you're connected or if you're whatever, that you're going to reach this state of just empty nothingness. The world doesn't work like that. Even if you do experience that state, I want to say that that's an illusion and it won't last forever. What I do want to encourage you with is I'm now piece by piece trying to destroy the false teaching that if you're a spiritual person, you will be at peace and there will be nothing going on inside of you and nothing will bother you, and then once you've reached that, then you're in a place of spirituality, heightened spirituality and consciousness. That has not been my experience at all. And if we understand what Ginnungagap is, then we will understand that when you get to that place of emptiness, it will not be a place of flatline nothingness. It will be full of such intense power that, unless you are internally in a state of peace and harmony, it'll tear you apart. And it is from that space of intensity where you aren't making any efforts either on the thought level or on the physical level to differentiate yourself, to make yourself into something. It is from that state of, almost chaos that you create. And so to get to that place of emptiness, which is the place of birth, where life begins, you have to what? You have to die. This is why you hear in so many religions, the idea of dying to the self. In Christianity, it's used really improperly and really destructively because what they want to do is make you feel guilty for who you are. And so you die to yourself and you surrender to Jehovah or to whatever it is. But the person that you're dying to is your self. Not the little self, but the big self. So there's self, and then there's self. The little self is dying to the big self, which means you let go of any specifics about who or what you think you are. I'm going to repeat myself again because repetition is a good way to learn. I said this yesterday, that the reason that we forget our past lives is because if we remembered who we were in a past life, then we would be bound by the limitations of who that person was. And if you've incarnated into this life, meaning the other life you didn't achieve all of your desires, notice how I didn't say achieved enlightenment, because it's not about that, it's about achieving all of your desires. So there was something missing in your strategy in the last life. So you wipe the slate clean, you create a whole new avatar, which has a different personality, maybe a different sex, different ethnicity, right? You live in a different time. You create something from scratch. And you do that so you can then, from scratch, from emptiness, create your ultimate happiness. This touches on the idea of wanting to control. And whenever people ask me questions like, how come we don't remember who we were? I know, without even knowing you, I know that at least in that moment, what you want is to control. And the only reason you want to control something is if you feel you're out of control. And if you feel you're out of control, you're in a state of fear. And as you know, fear is not a place to operate from in order to create your ultimate life. So I invite you to let go of that and go to the place of not knowing what the hell's going on or what's going to happen. Because the truth is we don't know. It's an illusion to think that we know what's going to happen. I mean, listen, I'm no different than a lot of you. I have a thing about wanting peace and quiet. And so, I've always sought to give myself a place to live where there's just peace and quiet, and I feel like I have control over my environment. And I live next door. There's a big, huge pillbox building, and the people rent it out, for 30 days at a time. And so when I'm not comfortable, I get into fear about who's going to move next door to me. Are they going to be loud? But the truth is that I don't have any control over what happens outside of really anything. I have very limited control over what happens inside my house. I mean, I can't even control whether or not how many flies get in. I open the door, the flies will come in. We don't have any control over anything, really. Anything could happen. I mean, there could be a spaceship could land and take us all away. There could be a meteor that could come crashing in through my roof. A plane, this does happen. A plane could fly over and crash into your house. You think you're safe in your house. Maybe you build like a mansion on a hill and it's surrounded by 40 acres and giant walls, well, a plane could still crash into your house. You don't have any control over anything. So letting go of the idea of having control, you only have one choice, which is to go into a place of trust and allow things to happen. This is the space from which you can create your ultimate future. And I'm giving you all this again because what I want to drive home is that you can be in that place of emptiness and feel like you're coming apart. Because you probably are. Because Ginnungagap is the yawning chasm. You put something in and it gets pulled apart. You know, the closest thing we might have is a black hole. You know, and here's an interesting visual. You know, I'm not a scientist, but you know, I've looked at black holes a little bit. And so one of the things they theorize would happen, excuse me, one of the things they theorize would happen is that if you are drifting towards a black hole, and you're going, and you enter what's called the event horizon, and the event horizon is, you know, if the black hole is right here, the singularity, and then there's this, you know, whatever, the event horizon which is around it, that's the point at which you can't go back. Once you hit the event horizon, the gravity from the black hole is so great that there's no amount of force that you can deliver which would break you free of that. And so what they say is that if somebody is watching and you're drifting towards a black hole and you hit the event horizon, that, well, they say all kinds of things. Like for us, time changes and you'd be sitting there watching somebody and they're stuck and they're not moving. They're experiencing time happening normally, but you see them just stop and freeze. And then they just disappear or something like that. Maybe I have that backwards. I can't remember which one it is. Anyway, one of the things they say is called spaghettification, which is that when you reach the event horizon, that the gravity differential, you know, there's the gravity on the one side of the event horizon and then gravity on the other side, and there's a big difference, is that what would happen is the gravity inside the event horizon would start pulling you faster, and it would stretch you out like a spaghetti, a string of spaghetti. And that, of course, that would be a horrible experience to go through. And what that reminds me of is that reminds me of what happens when we enter into new phases in our life where we are given the opportunity to make drastic changes, and we don't. And we hold on to the past. And how horrifically we suffer when we do that. From an astrological perspective, we are exiting the age of Pisces and we're entering into the age of Aquarius. People have called this period the ascension, the quickening, all kinds of things. And I will co-sign that because I do believe that energy is going to move in a completely different way. The age of Pisces was the age of those who had power and those who didn't, which is why the age of Pisces means the fish. Piscus means the fish. And there's no coincidence that the symbol of Christianity is the fish, because Christianity is the religion for the age of Pisces, and the religion of Christianity is about the servant who's put to death at the orders of the Father. There's the one in power, and then there's the servant who's, you know, basically the slave. The middle of the age of Pisces was the Middle Ages, the heart of the age of Pisces was the Middle Ages, and in the Middle Ages you had those people who were in castles, and then you had the rest of people who were literally living in filth outside the castle walls, and they served the master, the serfs. There was just those who had and those who didn't. That was pretty much it. And that age is coming to an end. And so those who hold on to the values of the age of Pisces, and the values of the age of Pisces are make as much money as you can, get as much stuff as you can, gain as much power as you can, and then build walls with all of that money and all of that stuff so you can protect yourself from whatever, life. That worked in my parents' day. And when my parents were alive, what you did is you got out of high school and you decided if you were going to go to college or if you were going to go to a trade school. And if you went to a trade school, you learned a trade, and then you did that trade for 40 years, and then you got a pension and you retired. If you went to college, you went and learned some higher skill, and then you went to work for a company or maybe a couple of companies until you retired, and then you lived off of your retirement. Can't do that anymore. You can't do that anymore because we don't live in the age of Pisces anymore. It's moving into the age of Aquarius. And so just like the people who are at the event horizon, who are partway in the black hole and partway out of it, they're getting stretched like into a piece of spaghetti. This is what's happening with people who are trying to hold on to the old ways. And the old ways are trying to get as much stuff and holding on to it and trying to be safe by surrounding yourself with a bunch of stuff. Energy works like that too. Health works like that. That if you want to be healthy, you operate from a state of non-attachment and you don't hold on to anything. People, places, things, emotions, ideas. If you hold on to those things keep you trapped. And then the rest of you starts again getting pulled into the black hole, and this is what ages you. I really believe that. It's been my experience. And again, it's not about feeling comfortable and peaceful. It's not about that. It's about being in the eye of the storm, having all of the energy or all of the emotions flying around in all kinds of different directions, feeling like you're being pulled apart, but taking actions based on emptiness. And so it takes a lot of discipline as well as a lot of trust to be in that scenario where you are emotionally coming apart at the seams and you're not taking any actions on all of the fears that are flying through you. But you're taking actions based on consciousness. And if you want to know what that means, really the only thing you have to worry about when it comes to consciousness, there's only one thing you need to know, and that is, what is your soul desire? As long as you know what your soul desire is, it doesn't matter emotionally what you're going through. Because that is, you use that as the focal point to keep drawing yourself back to your ideal timeline. Okay? So I know I had some notes here. Let's see if I wanted to talk about emptiness being the ultimate feminine. And in order to do that, we're going to talk about the sun. So, the sun is a Germanic word. It was the name of the goddess for that bright, shiny disk in the sky. And her name was Sunna. I should capitalize that. Her name is Sunna. So when you point to the sun, you're actually pointing to the goddess of the ancient tribal Germanic people. And they worshipped the sun as a woman, the feminine. Which is interesting because in modern times, even in modern Paganism, a case in point, the Hindu religion, they worship Surya. Surya is a male god. But when you look at even older, like shamanic religions, the sun is feminine and the moon is masculine. It's been switched. Now, every planet in astrology has both a male and a female aspect. So it's not like one is right and the other is wrong. It just shows you where their focus was. So for our ancestors, they saw the sun as the source of all life, which indeed it is. Because without the sun, no plants would grow. Without any plants, there wouldn't be any animals. Without any animals, we wouldn't have anything to eat, assuming that you're not a vegan. So even if you are a vegan, it doesn't matter. The sun creates the green stuff that you eat that keeps you alive. But no matter how you looked at it, if you want to worship the male aspect of the sun is the sun projects rays. Rays is Ra, right? Which is the sun in Egyptian, I believe. I think I'm right about that. It is Raito, which is the rune for the track of the sun. Represents the command of the king. The king says, "Here's the law. We shall do this." It's like a ray of the sun. It cannot be thwarted. It must be followed to the letter of the law. So it represents the law. So as it turns out, the sun is actually hotter the farther away you get from the surface of the sun. So the surface of the sun is actually cooler than, I don't know how far out it goes, but you go out considerably far, and the rays of the sun are actually hotter than the surface of the sun. And here you see the masculine and the feminine. The masculine would be the rays that come down and touch us. That is the masculine, the projection of the sun. The power of the sun, where the rays got their source, is in the center of the sun. And in the center of the sun, you have nuclear fusion. Nuclear fusion of the hydrogen atoms. The gravity in the center of the sun is so intense that it actually crushes the molecules of, or the atoms of hydrogen. And it is the crushing of those atoms, that explosion, that nuclear fusion explosion, which then bounces around inside of the sun for a really long time. I don't know how long, but a long time. And then it finally makes its way out of the sun as rays. But it is the feminine, it is the contraction, that energy of contracting, that energy of nothingness that squeezes and contracts the hydrogen and crushes it, and that power of crushing it, destroying it, is what creates the light and the heat. And so again, Ginnungagap is a place of destruction. And in order to get to that place, you have to allow yourself to be crushed. In terms of your ego, yourself, the idea of who you think you are, needs to be completely destroyed. When you're in that state of destruction, it is horrible. There's nothing pleasant about what I've just described. It's not like, oh my gosh, I'm becoming enlightened, and it's just so peaceful now, and it all makes sense, and it's all so beautiful, and all those horrible feelings have gone. No, it's not like that at all. It means that the pressure of the gravity, as it squeezes your identity. Your identity starts to flip out and tries to really hold on to its life. It starts flipping out. So when you're going to this place of emptiness, it feels like you're coming apart or being squished and destroyed. And I'm saying that's okay. It means you're going towards that place of emptiness, that place of Ginnungagap. When you are completely destroyed, then you can be in the place of having all of that power to intend your reality, and then you can, quote, be born again. Do you see where all this stuff comes from? This is why, this stuff comes up in all religions in some way or other. Dying to the self, death and resurrection, being born again, all of that. It's coming from, I'm having a hard time putting it into words. So this is, just another person here, stumbling over their words, trying to put into words this concept of being destroyed and then recreated again. Okay? So when we're focusing on this emptiness, this is the power of the feminine. The power of the feminine, the pure power of the feminine, is actually a very awesome and frightening power. And I can tell you, having tapped into it in the spirit fighting tradition and knowing what just tapping somebody with the pure feminine can do, I would much rather go up against the masculine than the feminine. I would much rather go up against an angry guy, because you'll see him coming. Guys telegraph what they're going to do. They tell you before they do it. Women, if they decide that they're going to destroy you, you'll never see them coming. Never see them coming. So that's another reason to treat your women with respect. The power that they have is pretty awesome. All right, so let's see here. I'm going to answer questions. So here's how it works. If you're new to the channel, the way that I interact with you is that you write a question. I don't want your opinions, your ideas. They're wonderful, and we all have them, and yours are just as valid as anybody else's. But I'm only interested in answering questions, people who have questions for me. So you write the word question, and then you put a well thought out question that I can understand so that I can best answer you. Make sure that your questions are well thought out, because I have a very limited amount of time. And if I sense that you are bullshitting yourself, which most of us are, I am going to want to attack that. So if you want to avoid me coming at you ruthlessly and tearing you apart, really think about what your question is and try and operate from an emotional standpoint, what it is you want for yourself. Okay? Try and stay out of your head and in your feelings, and you'll get a better response from me. So let's see if, well, I'll go ahead and take a little bit of a break, and then we'll come back here, okay? So, be right back. Okay, let's see what we have in terms of questions. Christy Williams, thank you. She dropped down $1.99. Thank you very much for supporting the channel. Dean Nevins did not write question. However, I do see that it is a question. And he says, does the Ansu's rune help with communicating with the universe and other people? Or is it mainly about communicating with the celestial gods? It's both. So remember, we don't live in a dualistic universe. We live in a hologram. A hologram is multifaceted. And the example that I like to use to explain what it's like to live in this holographic universe is, when I was a kid, my mom had one of those fake crystal chandeliers with the big crystals in it, you know, with the multifacets, and she would take those down and polish them and hang them back up. And I can remember as a kid grabbing one of those little fake crystals and putting my eye to one of the facets in the crystal, and in there I'd see a bunch of all the other facets and all the little tiny pictures that were coming in, and the kaleidoscope of colors that were coming in. And it didn't matter which one you looked at. If you turned around and looked through another one, you saw all the other facets. So there's not a one answer for anything in this universe. We live in a hologram. So the answer to your question is, it is both. It is both and it is neither, all at the same time. Jedi Black Knight question, would the 4, 8, 12 houses in the D1 chart be good pointers to spiritual powers you're destined to awaken? Have you also seen this from the D20? I hesitate to answer that because I'm not really in an astrological mood right now. This thought of emptiness and coming from the thought of thinking ahead to figure out what your spiritual powers are, to me is seems kind of silly. That's just where I'm at right now. So, what I will say about your spiritual powers is that your spiritual powers are not something that you can plan out. You can potentially speed them up, but even if I tell you what your spiritual powers are, that could actually be the worst thing for you, because then you think you know what you're going to be, and then you don't go through the unintended life happenings that will bring it about. When you do Celestial Qigong, qigong.thunderwizard.com, when you do that Qigong, what will happen is whatever your spiritual powers are will be released. And everybody's spiritual powers are different, and your spiritual powers are not things that you need to own and be proud of or have any control over. Your spiritual powers are the results of your karma. If somebody is a great healer and they can heal thousands of people, it means that they have physically harmed people in a previous life, and they have to balance that out by being a healer. The universe is very kind and forgiving, so instead of making you feel guilty for all the people that you've hurt, you feel really good about, oh look, I'm going to heal him and I'm going to heal her, but these are all people you've harmed in previous lives. You're just simply balancing it out. So I'm just not in an astrological mood because I don't want to. I want to stay in this place of emptiness. So I don't have an answer for your question today. Blake W. question: when using the purification progression of the 5 elements, do you move clockwise or counterclockwise? Okay, so Blake, there's a difference. So for those of you who are not familiar with what I'm talking about, you want to go to thunderwizard.com. That is the website where you can learn shamanism from the ground up, step by step, which includes working with the 5 elements. And so there are 2 progressions of elements that I teach. One is the creating progression, which is ether, fire, earth, air, and water. If you use the elements in that progression, that goes in a clockwise fashion around the, where do I want to go? Do I have the 5 elements in here somewhere? I wish that I did. I don't see them. In any case, you go in a clockwise direction starting from the east. If you go in a clockwise direction, you will use the creative progression of the elements. East is ether, south is fire, southwest is earth, west is air, and north is water. So if you go in that progression, that builds energy. It's creative. So that's why we use the thunder wheel in a clockwise fashion, because we want to use that energy to create. What did you call it? I know you're using my words, but let's see, what did you call it? When you use the purification progression, so the purification progression doesn't create, it destroys, and it purifies. So it gets rid of excess energy, stale energy. This is the way that you would use the elements to destroy negativity, to fight ghosts and evil entities and that sort of thing. And that is neither clockwise or counterclockwise. It's like creating the storm. So that is ether, air, fire, water, earth. So that goes from east to west to south to north to the middle. Creates a swirl. It swirls the energy around. So it's neither clockwise or counterclockwise. So I hope I made that clear in whatever resources you're using of mine to learn that. Okay? I hope I answered your question there. I think I did. Okay, so let's take a look here and see what else we got. Auschifer Wright, question: how would you get to this place of emptiness, or get from self to self? Well, I explained to you how you get there. You have to die. You have to die to the idea of who you think you are. Now, the great thing is that life does this to you all on its own. All of your tragedies, all of your challenges are things that are seeking to dislodge you from your idea of who you think you are, what you own, what your job is, what your name is, what you want to do, what gives you value. Challenges will come to destroy that. And these are all opportunities for you to die to yourself. This is what I'm trying to say. This place of emptiness is not a place of bliss and happiness, unless the only way it would be that is if you have zero attachments. And then it would be. It would be a place of power. You might not even feel anything. But if you have attachments to who you think you are, or what you're going to be, or anything, then it's going to start tearing you apart. So again, what I'm trying to drive home is I'm trying to destroy the idea of modern religion, and from that I mean from 2,000 years ago onward, even including much of what is taught in Buddhism. The idea of reaching a static state of enlightenment or salvation. This is denial, pure and simple. It's denial of the dynamic state of the universe. This universe is in a constant state of dynamic motion. Nothing stops, ever. You never stop. The idea that you're going to reach a place where it'll all be over is not going to happen. The only way to get to where you can be at peace with this constant dynamic motion is to be at a place where you don't have any attachments. How do you get to a place without having attachments? you have to achieve all of your desires. Your attachments are nothing more than desires. So again, I want to attack the false notion that having desires is unspiritual. Having feelings is unspiritual. We have feelings as a result of either getting or not getting what we want. And we are in a constant state of wanting something. You either want, I mean, I've got tea right here. I've got my air conditioner on. I've got my protein drink. I'm constantly trying to change little things so I can get more of what I want, be more comfortable. Wanting to achieve enlightenment is a desire. So we live in a universe of desire. In fact, the feminine, the goddess, when you understand the goddess is desire. The goddess is Maya. M-A-Y-A. Which is what? Illusion. What is the illusion? The illusion that if I just get this, it'll all be okay. The Hindu tradition has it pretty good, which is Shiva, which represents the pure masculine, which is pure non-attachment and non-movement, by the way. The masculine doesn't move. The feminine moves. Movement is feminine. Static is masculine. And so Shiva represents the ultimate masculine, and he is immovable. He is left to himself. He is in a state of deep samadhi, meditation. He is at union with everything. He has no desires. He has no self. He's at union with everything. And Shakti, the feminine, in order to connect with him and to create, which is what she wants to do, she wants to create, she has to create desire in him. And so there's all of these myths about how she goes to all of these great lengths to create desire in him, because without desire, he won't need her and he won't want her. And she wants to be wanted by him. And so she tries to and successfully creates desire within him. And then he is awoken out of his blissful nothingness by desire. And in fact, it bothers him so much he kills the god of desire. And it is her compassion for the god of desire, please bring him back, that he falls in love with her, and which creates a desire. He desires her, and then they copulate, and their copulation is what creates the universe. Right? So I don't know if I'm your question. What it came off of somebody's question. What was that? So I was answering somebody's question about how to get to the place of emptiness. So you don't have to work to try and get to the place of emptiness. There's really only one thing that I recommend that people do, and everything else that we do is just a tool to get us back to this one thing. And this one thing is find out what it is you truly desire and go do it. It's the only thing that you're required to do. And reincarnation is nothing more than you falling short of achieving what it is that you want. And this is what this is what the illusion is. I talked about shadow selves and other timelines and other dimensions, trying to pull you away from that. And to the extent that you're pulled into one of those alternate false timelines and you live out your life in one of those false timelines, when you're done with it, you go, oh man, I got sidetracked. I got to do it again. Because I know what I want. I want to do it again. And you choose to come back, and it's because you haven't fulfilled all of your desires. And it's the answer to, that pain. But again, to get to that place of emptiness, it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you who it is you think you are and what it is that, gives you worth and all of that stuff. I'm just repeating myself now. Dean Nevins, question, can we safely work with more than one rune at a time? It's okay with me. I can only tell you my experience is that I was going to come and talk about one of the runes tonight in connection with this, and I decided against it because when I talk about the runes, that rune comes alive in my life, and the runes are the base energies of the universe. They're the fires of the universe, and so I just don't have the ability to summon them without having them completely do all kinds of stuff. So, I have enough respect for them that I don't just casually do that. It's okay with me if you want to work with more than one rune at a time. Makes me want to ask you why and all that other stuff, but whatever. He's considering Fehu and Ansuj together. Well, go for it and see if it works. There are people that tattoo runes on them. I wouldn't dare tattoo a rune on me. I mean, for me, that would just be the ultimate hubris to think that I could take that infinite power, that fire that creates the universe, and tattoo it on me as though I own it. To me, that's just really, it's just stupidity for me. I wouldn't do that. Other people can do it. So I'm not telling you what you can and can't do. Experiment and see what happens. I had a student a long time ago, and he had some health issues, and he wanted to be healthier. And so he knew that Uruj was the rune for power and strength, and of course it can mean health. But it's also the rune of especially male sexual libido. So he was, in his teens, and he decided he was going to chant Uruj all day, every day, because he wanted to work through his health issues. And he came back and he said, it's driving me crazy. I've never been this horny in my life. It's driving me crazy. So the runes are nothing to play around with. But if done with consciousness, and they are here, they've been given to us. Odin revealed them to us so that we can use them. So again, Dean, I literally have no attachment one way or the other if you practice them or don't practice them. Ideally, you can work with more than one rune at a time if you choose to. So I trust your ability. I know Dean, he's one of my apprentices. So I know your thought process is, you think things through. You don't just do things for no reason. So go for it and let us know what happens. Cameron Mack, question. What kind of ritual, if any, would be appropriate to tap into this power? Again, this power is here all the time. For me, if I want to tap into this emptiness, I go into my solar plexus. And I let myself fall into my solar plexus. But you can easily bring about that state of emptiness by going after your soul desire. Focus on your soul desire. What is your soul desire? Your soul desire is that one thing that gives you the greatest joy at any given moment. The way you find out what your soul desire is you ask yourself, all right, if I lived in a fantasy world where I didn't have to make money, I didn't have to gain anybody's approval, and I didn't have to take care of anybody or do anything for anybody else, I was only required to do one thing that made me crazy, seriously happy, what would that one thing be? And then once you figure out what that is, that's your soul desire, go do it. If you don't know, and when I ask you that, you say, I don't know, then that means you're in conflict. What you're in conflict about is that your soul wants to do one thing, but the human part of you wants to please something or somebody else. And so on an unconscious level, you're in conflict, which means you can't make up your mind what it is you want. And I'm here to tell you that at any given point in time, you can go to that place of emptiness and ask yourself that question, and you will know. You will know what it is. but you're going to have to die to yourself. Sometimes dying to yourself means dying to the idea of meeting your parents' expectations or society's expectations or God's expectations. You may have to die to that before you can get to knowing what it is that truly makes you happy. And that is a death, and that is horrible. That is just like Ginnungagap. It tears you apart. So you guys are asking the right questions, but you're asking from an assumption. The assumption is, well, I'm not there. How do I get there? You're always there. It's the one thing you can't escape. So change your assumption about that. Yeah, there isn't a direction for emptiness. There isn't a mantra for emptiness. There is a word, and all directions and all mantras will take you to that emptiness. Because there's the north, which is Niflheim, which is the realm of the waters of life, which is the closest thing to Ginnungagap that we can get to in manifested reality. But even that is a pale shadow compared to the true Ginnungagap. So the true Ginnungagap is nowhere and everywhere. But again, the idea that you need to go to a direction and do a mantra to tap into it, you're operating from the wrong assumption. There's the one thing that you never, ever are away from is that emptiness. It's always there. It's like death. It's always there. Auschifer, right question. Is that what Odin did? Is what Odin did? You mean go to that emptiness? Yeah, that's what Odin's all about. He died to himself, and as a result of he didn't just die to himself, he sacrificed himself. Let me write this out. Odin sacrificed him little self to him big self. He sacrificed himself to himself. That's all we're talking about here. And that will happen. Life will bring that to you. You don't have to do a whole lot of work to make that happen. You just have to react differently. Reacting, this is when you're in the midst of the storms and you don't take action based out of fear. You take action based out of the consciousness of your soul direction, your soul purpose. This is why knowing what your soul purpose is the most important thing. And it will, once you tap into it, it will be the anchor that anchors you back into your ideal timeline. When you're in your ideal timeline, you have all of the resources that you need in order to achieve your greatest desires. I didn't say that, notice I didn't say you're going to have all the money you need, because it may not be money. If your greatest desire is to live in the middle of the Amazon and live off the land, then money and houses and credit cards are the last things that you need. But you'll be given whatever else you need. For me, again, my thing is surfing. It's the thing that just, it grounds me. It pulls me back to myself. I can't explain it, and I don't need to explain it. All I need to know is that my life needs to be focused on that. And, thankfully, at my age, I'm about to turn 55 on the 17th. Once you get to 55, you're not even, early middle-aged anymore. It's like from then on, you're, in fact, I was in a store the other day, and I hadn't been there before and whatever, and I was asking the guy questions, and so I got some protein powder and something else, and he said, I'm going to give you a senior's discount. And, he said, oh, you got a little white on your beard, and I got a senior's discount. And so, I feel I am really, really grateful for the health that I have. I really am. I mean, I'm amazed at the health that I have. But I'm also really, really aware that clock is ticking. I may be this healthy for another 20 or 30 years. I don't know. But I'm watching people. It's like when you're on the battlefield and you're running towards the enemy and they're shooting at you and the guys next to you are falling like flies. That's what it feels like to me. People are getting older, they're getting sick, they're getting... I'm still running. When is it my turn? When is that bullet going to hit me? So far that bullet hasn't hit me yet, and as long as I can, I am going to surf until I can't surf anymore. Maybe I'll have another soul desire. Maybe another soul desire will pop up. I don't know. But for right now, that's the one thing I need, it's helping me stay in the moment, staying in the right now. I really appreciate it. I don't feel immortal anymore, And so I'm sharing that with you because that's a good attitude to adopt. That will help. That helps you because when you've got nothing else left to do, this is why when people start talking about their bucket list, when people are talking about bucket list, they're really starting to move towards their true soul desire. So you should live your whole life, even if you're 10 years old. You should live your life as though you've got a bucket list and you've got a limited amount of time and you want to get to all of those things that are important to you before time runs out. It's the only way to live. There's no other way to live and be happy. Every other way is misery, illness, and death. You can have a giant, huge mansion with billions of dollars and 60 cars and 20 wives and 10 husbands. And you can still be old and sick and miserable because you're not living for what gives you happiness. All right, so dude with a hat. Question, I cast some runes today. I had Manaj land standing on edge. I did not know if it meant anything. First time I had a rune land standing up. I've never experienced that either. I don't even know what to say about that. So your guess is as good as mine. My experience with the runes is that when you cast the runes, whatever they do, they're trying to tell you something. And as much as I would like to say it, there's been times when, I try not to cast runes for myself because I have an emotional agenda. And so it's hard to read them. I also have a belief that you can influence the reading beforehand and then the runes will be kind of meaningless. But even the times when, I've done rune readings for myself and I haven't liked or understood the outcome, I go, oh, I don't think that, or I don't like that. They're always right. So I'll cast the runes for you and tell you what's coming down the pike, but I don't really know that I want to cast them for myself anymore because it's just easier just to go through life and let life happen. But I don't know what that means, having a rune stand on edge like that. I can start guessing, but my guess would be as good as yours, so guess away. Rommel Blacklip question. When we find this place of emptiness, should we fill it with new info and assumptions? Well, you've asked a good question. The place of emptiness will mean that you don't have any assumptions. The one thing I think that we can never get rid of, nor should we try to get rid of it, is our soul desire. So for me, the idea of emptiness serves me if I can get to that place and lose everything so that my soul desire will be the only thing that's left. So to answer that question, I wouldn't fill it with anything else. I would just use it so that it will get rid of everything that is not your soul desire. That's how I would use it. All right. Cameron Mack, question. What kind of rune cards do you like to use? Well, that is quite the good question. Because I have one of my students. His name is Mark Graham. And here is the rune set that he's just put together. He's put together some really great runes. Here's what the box that I have looks like. I think this was, can't see it too well. I think he's changed that, and I have a new box of runes coming to me, which I think he made some changes. Anyway, his name is Mark Graham, and the ones I have are called Runes for Writers. There's another, here's the other one. There's another rune cards that I use, comes from here. Living Magic. It's hard to see, isn't it? Can you see it? It's kind of hard to see because the light's kind of weird. So maybe you can see it there. Living Magic Learning Card Series. Rune Learning Cards. And I use them because they, they're okay, they work. But like a lot of rune cards, it has, interpretations written on them, which I think are just nonsense. I mean, so much of the rune, just nonsense. So I would get it just because they work, but I wouldn't take anything that's written on there about the runes as meaning anything, because they literally just pull meanings out of their ass, and they just do word association, and there's no thought process there. Mark, however, on the other hand, this guy's solid, and I agree with his interpretation of runes and how he uses them. So if I had to pick one, and I didn't have one, I would get these. Runes for Writers, Mark Graham. I don't know if he has a website or whatever, but you can contact him, I guess. I think I could be wrong. I think he has a website. I think it's just simply markgraham.com. I'm not sure. All right. Dervisio, question. Currently I'm going to my perfect reality, but I feel and see how my old negative reality is trying to pull me back. Do you have some tips for the transition? No. I'm happy to hear that you're going to your perfect reality. I don't know what that means. I don't know you. I haven't worked with you. It makes me worry that you might be in denial. I don't know that you're going to your perfect reality. I can only, give you the benefit of the doubt. There's something in your question that makes me feel you might be in denial. The idea that you call one of your old reality negative and the other one perfect. And I know you're using the same words that I use, so forgive me, but I'm just responding to what I feel is there's something in there that makes me feel like you're in denial about something, and I could totally be wrong. To answer your question, it's what I've been saying. There's only one thing you need to know, and that is what your soul desire is. And if you don't know what your soul desire is, then you need to use other things, other tools, to help you figure that out. So your soul desire is like a beacon. It's like a light. It's like a lighthouse. Imagine that you're on a stormy ocean, and it's dark in the middle of the night, and you can't see where you are. You don't know where land is. And you see a lighthouse up ahead. And you go, oh, there's the light, and that will tell you where land is. Also tell you what to stay away from. But you use it like that. It's like a beacon. The beacon is the joy that you feel when you think of that one thing that gives you happiness. Tap into that. If you can't feel the joy, that's okay. At some point in time, you will be able to feel it and know what it is. Here's my experience of how that happens. At some point in time, you become miserable about your life or unsatisfied about your life in some way. Usually people don't change unless they absolutely have to. So that means usually people are miserable about something. Bad relationship, poverty, job, something like that. They're miserable. And they go, what do I do? And then somebody like me comes along and says, well, what do you want to do? Well, I want to become a dancer. Okay, well, why don't you do that? Well, because that's not very practical, and my parents don't like it, and I don't have the money, and I injured myself, and there's all these bullshit excuses. And then if you have a good friend or a good counselor, they say, so what? Just go do it anyway. Who cares? You only have one life. Go live your life and enjoy it. And then you get really excited and you say, yeah, that's it. And you think you're always going to feel that excitement. And then you start quitting your job or leaving your parents or leaving your spouse or, changing your diet or, stop smoking cigarettes or something like that. And then all of a sudden the joy is gone and all you have is all this fear and indecision. When you're in that space of fear and indecision, you remember what you committed to. You said, I committed to myself that I was going to go become a dancer. And so that's what I'm going to go do, regardless of how I feel. That's what's really important. That place of emptiness is going to be tearing you apart. So you're not going to be able to rely on how you're feeling all the time. When you get that flash of inspiration, that is like you're in the storm and you're walking along and there's one of those little huts. And you can go inside the hut and there's a fireplace and some food and you can, but you can't stay there forever. You can only stay there long enough maybe to eat something and take a nap and then you got to keep going. That's what happens when you reach that space of either inspiration or somebody comes along and gives you some helpful advice and you get inspired and you think, yeah, I can do it. Yeah. You're in the little hut, but you have to step out of the hut and then hike through the cold, snowy, stormy night. And then you don't know. The only thing you will have left is what you committed to. And so when you get that space of inspiration, and like if you talk to me on the phone, if you want, I can help you. career.thunderwizard.com. I can't guarantee it, but I'm 99% sure that within an hour I can help you at least find out what your soul desire is. You going out and doing it is a whole different thing. I can't do that for you. But once you have that and you have the inspiration, you make a commitment, like a life or death commitment. Again, you're in the little hut on the mountainside, and there's an old mountaineer, and he's there, and he knows the directions, and you have to get to the other side, on the other side of the mountain to get to where your family is, and he knows where they are, and he can say, yes, you have to go this, but be prepared, there's a 25% chance that you'll survive. You might die. And then you have to sit there and decide, do I want to go be with my family or do I want to? And then you say, you know what? Even if it kills me, I'm going to go after that thing that I want. And then you pump yourself up and you talk to them about the best way to do it and you feel excited and you say, I can do it. If other people did it, I can do it. And then you go out and then you're hanging by a fingernail on the side of the mountain and you're scared out of your mind. You only have one thing left, which is the commitment you made to yourself to go after it. Okay? Let's see, what else do we do? Cynthia McLeod, please write questions so I know what you're talking about. Energy vampires are anybody who tries to talk you out of your soul desire. However, nobody can do anything to you without your own permission. So there's no such thing as a victim. Nobody's victimizing you or stealing your energy from you unless you yourself have allowed that into your life to distract you from the fear of going after what it is you truly want. So energy vampires are there to remind you that you are not in alignment with yourself. You become in alignment with yourself and energy vampires will run away. Ghost in the Machine question, is Ginnungagap connected to Laguz? Ginnungagap is the source of everything. Everything. So all of the runes are connected to Ginnungagap. So the answer to your question is yes, but it doesn't mean that is Laguz, more connected to Ginnungagap than Raito. No. They're all Ginnungagap is the mother, is the source of everything. Cynthia McLeod, question, are energy vampires real? Only if you allow them. Anybody who thinks that energy vampires are sucking the life force out of them are people who are victims. And victims are people who are too afraid to go after what gives them the greatest joy. They're too afraid to go after what gives them the greatest joy because it is actually very frightening and painful and scary to let go of what it is you think you are and to go after your ideal self. And so it just simply comes down to just being too afraid. I'm not judging it, it's just the facts. I don't judge anybody for that. But it's just the facts. There's no way around it. I wish I could tell you, take this pill and it'll all be okay. You know, worship me and it'll all be okay. Accept Jesus and it'll all be okay. Everybody earns their own enlightenment. Everybody. And the only way to earn it is to face your fears and to overcome them. And the only way you're going to be able to overcome them is if you know what it is that you're going to gain by overcoming them. If you don't know what it is you truly want, then you are lost. And then energy vampires can find you because you need them to distract you. People who are possessed are people who desperately want to be distracted from their deepest pain. And so they allow themselves to be possessed by demons because the horror and the fear that the demons create is less than the actual pain that they have to go through to forgive their parents or cry over their lost loved one or whatever the hell it is. Mad Sweeney's Beer question, any suggestions for a mantra dealing with a soul-sucking, vicious elderly relative? Well, any mantra, I don't know your chart. I'd have to look at your chart to see what mantra you need. For that, you go to astrology.thunderwizard.com. We need to know what the planet is that wants to help you work through your unconscious issues. It's called the Dharma Devata. When you get a mantra for the deity that is associated with the planet that is your Dharma Devata, that will guide you to your, that will fix all the problems. I mean, you can see I had to stop myself because I, normally would launch into a thing about, nobody can do anything to you without, nobody's sucking the life force out of you, and you've chosen to do that. You created the scenario. I could go into all that, but at the same time, I understand that that is a reality that people experience. So when you're in that kind of experience, it's not enough sometimes for me to say that to you. Because sometimes you just can't, even though everybody can at any given point in time make any decision that they want, it sometimes is so far away from you that you feel like you're trapped and you can't. And so this is when mantra does its job. Mantra acts like a virus, protection program. It'll go into your unconscious mind and it seeks out the virus, which are your assumptions, your karmic issues that are keeping you trapped in self-sabotage, and it helps to pull it apart. So it's like taking, it's not magic in that you have to have the discipline to do it and follow through with the ritual, and at the same time, you have to face all the issues that come up. So you're not really getting a free ride, but sometimes it might feel like that. So without looking at your chart, I don't know. I'd have to look at your chart to see what is the right one for you. Here's one I can give you. You can do this mantra with the intention of show me to the mantra that I need. The easy thing to do is just get a reading from me. But you can do this in the meantime. Om Well, that's the way it has to be. Normally it's Om Namah Shivaya, but it can be Om Shivaya Namah. So since I wrote it that way, whenever I make a mistake, it's usually that somebody's doing something through me. So that must be for you. There you go, a freebie. That's designed just for you. Om Shivaya Nama. Om Shivaya Nama. Face north and do that. And chant that. Get a mala if you need to. Go get a 108 bead mala and figure out and learn, go online and learn how to chant with a mala and do that. Dervisio question, can the soul desire be anything? Of course it is. Why couldn't it be anything? In fact, remember, so I think you're new to the channel, Dervisio, right? So here's how you find out what your soul desire is. You go to a place of fantasy where anything can happen. There are no rules. It means if you want to have 3 heads and 4 wings and 5 feet, then you can have that. So you get rid of what you think you know about the world and about reality, and we go to this fantasy world where anything can happen. You don't have to make any money. You don't have to work for a living. You do not have to make anybody happy or meet anybody's expectations. There's only one rule, and that is that you have to be deliriously happy. And you can be or do anything you can imagine. In that fantasy world, without thinking about it, what is it that you want to do? Once you know what that is, that's what you're supposed to do, and then you go do it. So the answer is yes, it can be anything. Let's see the rest of your question. Can your soul desire be anything like be loved? Well, no, everybody wants to be loved. That's not a soul desire. Everybody wants to be loved. The soul desire, like I asked this, mothers have to be aware of this, because you ask mothers and I say, what's the one thing you want? They say, oh, I want my children to be happy, or I want to hug my children. And I say, well, that's part of it. You assume that they're with you. So that is just a basic fundamental desire. The soul desire is a very specific desire. It's not a general one like wanting to be loved, or as you said, wanting to live in abundance. Not work at all, but live in abundance. So that's not a soul desire. Not work at all. And so what you want, what you're saying is, can my soul desire be sitting on my couch eating Cheetos, watching YouTube and playing video games all day? No, that's not your soul desire. That's just being too lazy to work. And you're too lazy to work because you don't like your job. You don't like your job because your job is not your soul desire. So I obviously make a living. You can see I'm pointing to the things that I do, to some of the things I do to make a living. That's where my money comes from. Right now, technically, I'm working because I'm promoting myself. But it's not something that I would avoid doing. So the one mantra that I will share with you is, make a living doing what you would do anyway. If you live by that, you will be happy. Now, you won't be able to do that if you don't know what your soul desire is. My soul desire is surfing. I can't sit on my couch eating Cheetos and go surfing. It takes a little bit of effort. It's actually it can be, depending on the break and the waves, it can be a pretty taxing physical exercise. And I like that. I need to be physically active or I'm not happy. So your soul desire will include ways that you can be abundantly happy and able to take care of yourself, but it won't feel like work. It doesn't mean that you won't work. I work. I'm on the phone, with people, with clients for hours a day. I do these videos for 2 or 3 hours at a time, and sometimes I spend a lot of time as I'm walking on the beach or out surfing thinking about what I want to talk about next. That's all part of my work, but they're all things that I would do anyway. And most people, their soul desire and what will make them money is already in them, and they do it anyway. They just haven't said, how do I turn this into money? And that's all you got to ask. How can I do the things that I do anyway and turn it into money? I mean, I'm sitting on the couch eating Cheetos and watching Netflix and playing video games. But if that's really what brings you happiness, how can you turn that into money? I decided that I didn't want to work for somebody else. I decided I didn't want to work outside of the house. I decided I didn't want to have any overhead. And so lots of times I am literally lying on my couch or lying on my bed in my underwear talking to people on the phone. That's my work. And I get paid good money to do it. But it's not something that I wouldn't do anyway. I would still, if I was, quote, didn't have a job or whatever, I would still be lying on the couch in my underwear talking on the phone to people. I just get paid to do it now. So anyway, I want you to go look for this playlist, Dervisio. This is for you. Because I can tell by your question you don't understand what a soul desire is as I teach it. And that's okay. You need to just get a little education. So go and watch the Shamanic Secret Commandment to a Perfect Life. That is a playlist on my channel. So you have to search on my channel for it. There's also a book of the same name at michaelwilliamdenny.com. You read that book, you'll know how to find out what your soul desire is. And then you won't ask me questions like that. Okay. Cynthia McLeod, do you still need apprentices? No, I don't need apprentices. I've never needed them. What you're really wanting to ask me is do I have time for more apprentices? And the only way to know that is if you go to thunderwizard.com and you will see if I have spaces for apprentices. You'll see the different levels of subscription and you'll see, what's available and what's not. Most of the time they're usually sold out. But even if you sign up at thunderwizard.com at the $25 level, you still get access to all of these step-by-step videos which teach you mantra, ritual, shamanism, runes, energy work, and of course me babbling on and on about things I think are important. So go there and you'll find out. Matt Sweeney's beer question. I got a reading from your apprentice and my Dharma Devata is Jupiter. Thank you. So that's how you get out of it. Jupiter. Jupiter is the perfect one because Jupiter is the planet of boundaries. And so by worshiping Jupiter deity, you're actually asking for boundaries, and your question was all about personal boundaries anyway. So that's again why it's, these coincidences don't happen for nothing. Hey, that's it. We're out of questions. All right, I'll take a break. And if there are any more questions, I'll come back. Maybe I'll have something to say. We'll find out. All right, we're back. Doesn't look like there's any questions, so I guess I've answered everybody's question. All right, so is there anything else I want to say? Did I mention shunyata? I don't remember if I did. Shunyata. Shunyata is a Buddhist thing, and I don't pretend to know much about it, other than it's that state of emptiness. And it's interesting because shunyata, I believe, is derived from the Sanskrit, and it sounds very similar to Sunna, which is the goddess of the sun. We already talked about that, how the sun is powered by emptiness. It is the nuclear fusion at the center of the sun that creates all the light and the heat. That's why the sun is a goddess in the ancient traditions. Dean Nevins' question, what qualities or circumstances allow someone to channel art from the divine? I don't know that I understand your question. What qualities or circumstances? I don't know how to answer that. I guess what I want to tell you is the way you're going to channel your art from the divine is to tap into your soul. I wouldn't overthink it. I would just do it. I don't know, maybe it's something we can talk about next time we talk. But yeah, just from that question, it sounds like you're trying too hard. Just relax and do it. I was watching, what was I watching? I was watching Fargo, not the movie, but the TV series. I've been binge watching it. I just started it. And I don't know if you remember in season 2 where she's sitting on the stairs and she hallucinates, thinks she sees the guy, I think from Lifespring. And he says, do you know the difference between being and thinking? And then she comes up and she says, oh, I think I know what you mean. Don't think about that thing, just be that thing. Don't think about what you want, just be what it is that you want to be. And, that's in line with me every time I tell people to get out of their heads and stop intellectualizing things and just operate from your feelings. So in terms of you, I don't know. I honestly don't know what your method is for being able to channel art from the divine, except for just being it. There's a really great question that some therapists asks, which is, they'll ask a question about, like, what is it that you want out of life? And then the person says, I don't know. And the therapist will say, yeah, I know, but if you did know, what would it be? And strangely enough, when you ask somebody like that, they'll have an answer. So I kind of want to ask you the same thing, which is, you're saying, I don't know what qualities or circumstances allows me to channel art from the divine. And then I say, well, just do it. And then you say, I don't know how to do it. And then I say, yeah, but if you did know, how would you do it? And there's usually an answer there. So don't think about it, just be it. We did that when we would, in the spirit fighting, there were different sets for the 5 elements. And so you could strike somebody with wood or fire or metal or water or earth. And there was one guy in the class who was always trying to figure out what the technique was. Well, let's see. Earth is you kind of throw your elbow this way and you do this. And wood is when you drive from here. And metal is when you turn your wrist like that. And he would never get it. I mean, he could hit, but the elements were never really there. You couldn't really feel them. Whereas like the teacher would come by and he would do the same thing. He would just tap you. And he would think wood, feel like you got hit with a block of wood. You'd think metal, and he'd tap you, and it felt like you were getting sliced. You'd say fire, and he'd tap you, and the fire would burn through you. The water would hit you, and it would feel like you just got hit by a huge wave on top of your head. And he would ask the teacher the question, "How'd you do that?" And he said, "I was just water." "How did you do the metal?" I was metal. I became metal. Don't think it, just be it. It really is that simple. The hard part is that for him to be able to move from one element to the next meant he wasn't attached to who he was. He wasn't trying to find the guy that couldn't get it was always trying to figure out what is the trick. He didn't trust it. He was like, "I know you're doing something." Because it was, the guy could just barely tap you and you just crumple to the ground or fly across the room or whatever. And then he would try and replicate it, and he couldn't quite do it. And he was like saying, "I was watching your hand and your wrist moved like that." He said, "Okay, I won't move my wrist. I'll move it like this." Same thing. He's like, "I know there's a trick to it." He was overthinking it. So short answer is don't overthink it. Just be it. Justin Z question. If death is the way to Ginnungagap, all right. I haven't read your question yet, but whenever somebody starts a question with if, then, they're trying to get me into their intellectualizations. They're trying to get me to adopt their assumptions. They already think they know what the answer is, and they're usually trying to manipulate me so that I will co-sign their answer. And I usually end up destroying their whatever. So I might be wrong because I haven't read the whole thing yet, so we'll see. This is usually a sign of disaster when I see if, then. It's usually a very intellectualized question. Let's find out. Justin Z question. If death is the way to Ginnungagap, is, quote, ego death, for lack of a better phrase, efficient, or must one's vessel die as well? I mean, there's a lot of assumptions in that question. And I do think you're overthinking it. What is it that you really want to ask me? I think you're afraid of physical death. So when you're willing to die, you have to be willing to die on all levels. I'm not saying that ego death or physical death is worse or better or less or more than the other, because as it so happens, people can physically die and not have died in terms of their ego. This is what I think happens when people die of illness, especially illnesses like cancer. I say that having lost my soulmate to breast cancer, so I'm not saying it with any judgment. She was the most beautiful being in the universe, and I would do anything. I would sacrifice anything to be with her and only her. So bear that in mind when I say that. So you're thinking about it too much. You're trying to find the easier way. And when you die, you die. Maybe you die physically, maybe you die emotionally, maybe you die spiritually. But as I was saying before, there are people who what kills them is trying to hold on to who they think they are or what they think they are. And there usually is some codependence. They're trying to meet other people's expectations. Even if it's people who are dead, they're still trying to meet somebody's expectations. And they're not listening to who they truly are. And it ends up eating them up physically and killing them. Ego death is probably going to be more painful, because you made a differentiation. One of the assumptions is that in your question, ego death is somehow less than physical death. And that isn't always the case. Ego death may be worse than physical death. This is why in the past our ancestors weren't afraid of dying. They were afraid of losing their integrity. People, Christians did it too. There were Christians that were martyred because they wouldn't give up their faith. And for that, I have to applaud them, because they were willing to physically die to hold on to what, they believed was important to them. But the same was true with our polytheist ancestors. The Christians would do things like, burn them alive and flay them. And, there's one guy who, was forced to eat snakes, till he died because he wouldn't convert to Christianity. That's what a lot of the witch burnings are. They're trying to get people to convert, and they don't. So they call them a witch and they burn them at the stake just because they have a different belief. So I would get rid of that distinction, ego death versus physical death. Death is death. And sometimes you go through a death and your body stays intact. I'm not saying to go out and kill yourself. I'm not saying that suicide will grant you anything. That's exactly the opposite. But you have to be willing to lose absolutely everything to gain the one thing that you want. And then when you're thinking about the one thing that that you want, you're not asking these kinds of questions. If you're asking this question, then you don't know what it is you truly want, at least in the moment you ask that question. I just got through saying, I am not kidding you. If you could show me a way to be in the presence, like I could physically feel like I was in the presence of my soulmate, I would do whatever that was. I don't care. If that meant physically dying, I mean, when she died, if I thought that blowing my brains out would make me, I would have done it. Because what I wanted more than anything else was to be with her. And I'm only saying that to you because it was really clear to me what I wanted. When you know what you want, you don't care what you have to lose to get it. So if you're asking these kinds of questions, you don't know what you want. Okay? What else? All right, so ancient esoteric knowledge and metaphysics. We only do questions here. This is not a free-for-all where everybody types in their opinion and we have a discussion. So whenever I have to scroll through 5 or 6 things of you not asking a question and you telling people what you think you know, that takes away from my ability to ask questions. It's disrespectful to what I'm trying to do here. So I'm going to put you on a short little hiatus. Please only ask questions. Okay? Otherwise, you take time away from people who do want to hear my answers to their questions. Okay. Oh, did I delete it? I meant to put it on timeout. Anyway, I deleted it. Ghost in the Machine question. Can the ego die many times? Of course. We live in a continuous loop. Time isn't linear, it's circular. So of course it dies and resurrects and dies. We live multiple lifetimes. So the ego is no different than that. So yeah, it can die. I don't think there's any limit to how many times we can have an ego death. Wow, this guy really, yeah. Anyway, let's see what else. Anything else? It doesn't look like there's anything else. Okay. So I think we're about 2 hours in, so I think I'm gonna go ahead and end it today. I think I've said everything I want to say. If you haven't already, check out Naga Conspiracy. That's not what I wanted to do. NagaConspiracy.com. And yeah, I'm starting on that. I believe that will open a new way of teaching for me. And it will be a way for me to teach all this stuff in concentrated chunks that you can go over and listen to over and over again and meditate on over and over again. And ideally, it will kind of program that in for you. You don't have to think about it so much. What else? Any other announcements? If you want to learn the kind of astrology that I do, you can go to astrology certification.com. If you want to learn the runes and you want access to every single video that I have put about runes, in one place, including all of the what used to be paid videos or ones that you would have to pay for to get the DVD. You can go to runecertification.thunderwizard.com. And then if you get certified, I will be happy to have you be a Thunder Wizard rune reader. And when people do rune readings, by the way, if you're interested in a rune reading, you can go to runereadings.thunderwizard.com or transformation.thunderwizard.com. And if you want to get certified as a rune reader, then you will, when people go to one of runereadings.thunderwizard.com, you will be there. They can choose to either get a reading from me or from you or whoever else is certified. Take a look at the astrology.thunderwizard.com to see how that works, and you'll see there's more people getting certified all the time under that. So it's I'm trying to do that so that I don't want to just have students. I want to create teachers. And so I'm taking all of this knowledge that I've barfed out over, the past, however many years, and now I am teaching specifically, people how to do those things and to teach those things, because the best way to learn is by teaching. Okay, so that's it for me today, unless there's any last-minute questions. Nope, no more last-minute questions. All right then, so that's it for me, guys. Thank you so very much. I appreciate your times, and I'm looking forward to more interactions with you in the future there. All right, talk to you later.